There is a feeling almost everyone carries, but almost no one talks about. It doesn't have a clear name, it doesn't show up in your bank statements, it doesn't appear in any expense report, but you feel it, every day. It's the quiet feeling that you should already be further along by now, that somehow, somewhere, you missed something, that other people figured out a part of life that you didn't, that while you were trying your best, everyone else was secretly moving faster. You don't say it out loud, you barely even admit it to yourself. But when you scroll through your phone, when you see what your friends are doing, when you hear about someone your age buying a house or starting a business or going on a trip you can't afford, there it is again. That tightness in your chest, that dull pressure behind your eyes, that voice that whispers, "You're behind." And the strangest part is this: no matter how much progress you make, no matter how many things you achieve, no matter how much your life actually improves, that feeling almost never goes away. Today, we're going to look at where it actually comes from. Because once you understand it, something quietly powerful happens. You stop carrying weight that was never really yours to begin with. Let's go back to Alex. In the last video, Alex started to see something he had never noticed before. He saw the treadmill inside his own mind, the way his brain kept moving the goal further every time he reached it, the way more was never going to feel like enough. He did the work. He started to slow down. He began noticing his patterns instead of being controlled by them. Things were better. But one evening, something unexpected happened. Alex was sitting alone, scrolling through his phone. Nothing dramatic. Just a normal moment, the kind everyone has every day. He saw a post. Someone he used to know from years ago. Smiling. Standing in front of a new apartment. Talking about a promotion. Alex didn't say anything. He didn't react out loud. He just kept scrolling. But inside, something shifted. A familiar weight settled on his chest. A quiet voice in his mind started running calculations he didn't ask it to run. How old is he again? Wasn't he behind me a few years ago? How did he get there so fast? What am I doing wrong? The peace Alex had been building for weeks suddenly felt fragile. The progress he had made felt smaller. The life he had been quietly enjoying just minutes ago felt incomplete. Nothing in his real life had changed. Only what was on his screen had changed. And yet somehow, that was enough to make him feel poor again, behind again, late again. This is the trap we're going to talk about today. Because what happened to Alex in that moment is happening to millions of people, every single hour, in silence. And almost nobody knows what it really is. The reference point was stolen from you. The reference point you use to measure your own life was stolen from you a long time ago. You just never noticed. For most of human history, people compared themselves to a very small group. Their family, their neighbors, the people in their village, maybe 20, 50, 100 lives at most. And those lives were generally similar to theirs. Similar struggles, similar incomes, similar pace. The reference for doing okay was clear. It was visible. It was real. If you had a roof over your head, food on the table, and your family was healthy, you were doing well by the standards around you. The bar was set by the actual reality of your community. Today, that has completely collapsed. You no longer compare yourself to 20 people. You compare yourself every single day to thousands. And not just any thousands. You compare yourself to the most successful, most photogenic, most curated versions of strangers' lives, people you have never met, may never meet, and whose actual reality you will never truly see. You see the trip, but not the credit card debt that paid for it. You see the new apartment, but not the family loan behind it. You see the smile in the photo, but not the panic attack from the night before. You see the launch announcement, but not the 8 failed projects that came before. You see the success, but never the cost. Your brain doesn't process this honestly. It can't. It was never designed to. It absorbs everything you see as if it were real, complete, and accurate. It quietly stores all those highlights. And then, without you ever asking it to, it builds an invisible average inside your mind, an imaginary standard of where you should be. And that standard is impossible to reach, because it was never built from real lives. It was built from fragments, edits, best moments, performances. You're not measuring yourself against people anymore. You're measuring yourself against an illusion. And no matter how hard you work, no matter how much progress you make, you will always feel behind. Because the reference point you're chasing doesn't actually exist in real life. This is the first thing almost no one realizes. The race you're in was never fair. It wasn't even real. The invisible timeline. The invisible timeline is the second layer of this trap, and it might be even heavier than the first. Somewhere along the way, without anyone formally teaching you, you absorbed a schedule for your own life. By a certain age, you should have a stable career. By a certain age, you should own a home. By a certain age, you should be married, or at least settled. By a certain age, you should have savings, investments, a clear plan. By a certain age, you should have figured everything out. Nobody handed you this list. Nobody sat you down and said, "Here are the milestones. Here are the deadlines." But you learned them anyway. From your parents, from your relatives, from the way people talked at family dinners, from the questions adults asked you when you were younger, from movies, from culture, from 1,000 quiet messages you absorbed without realizing it. And now, that timeline lives inside you. So when you reach a birthday, and you haven't hit one of those invisible milestones, something inside you panics. Even if your life is going well, even if you're growing, even if you're learning, even if you're building something real, the voice in your head starts comparing you to a schedule that was never yours to begin with. You should be married by now. You should own something by now. You should know what you want by now. You should have it figured out by now. And that word, should, is one of the heaviest words in the human language, because every time you use it, you are punishing yourself for not matching a story someone else wrote. The truth is, nobody actually has a fixed timeline for life. Nobody. The people who look like they're on schedule are just people whose path happened to match the cultural template. It doesn't mean they're happier. It doesn't mean they're more fulfilled. It just means their life looks more recognizable from the outside. Meanwhile, the people who are quietly building something different, at their own pace, on their own terms, are often the ones who end up with the most authentic and meaningful lives in the long run. But during the journey, they feel behind. Constantly, painfully, because the timeline in their head doesn't match their reality. And until they realize that the timeline itself was the problem, they will keep punishing themselves for being on a path that was always more honest than the one they were supposed to be on. Alex carried this timeline for years. He didn't see it. He didn't question it. He just felt the pressure of it every time he heard about someone his age doing something he hadn't done yet. The pressure wasn't logical. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't helping him build anything. It was just weight. Heavy, invisible weight that he had been carrying since long before he understood what it was. The highlight reel versus the real life. The highlight reel versus the real life is the third part of this trap, and it's where comparison becomes especially cruel. Every life has two versions. There's the version you live, with all the small struggles, the boring afternoons, the quiet doubts, the unfinished projects, the moments where you feel lost, the days where nothing seems to work, the hours of effort that nobody sees, the setbacks, the mistakes, the slow, ordinary process of being human. And then there's the version you show, or that others show you. The polished version, the one that fits in a photo, in a sentence, in a post, the chosen moments, the wins, the smiles, the result without the process. Now here's the painful part. You always experience your life from the inside. You always see other people's lives from the outside. You feel every imperfection in your own story. You see every gap, every doubt, every shadow, every place where you wish things were better. But when you look at someone else's story, you only see the surface, the clean version, the chosen frame. So even when you compare yourself to someone whose actual life is harder than yours, your brain still concludes that they're doing better, because you're comparing your full reality, including the parts no one ever sees, against their highlight reel. It's not even close to a fair comparison. It can never be. And yet, your mind does it constantly, automatically, all day long. When you scroll through your phone, you're not seeing real lives. You're seeing the best moments, edited and curated, of thousands of people at once. And your brain quietly absorbs all of it as if it were the standard. The result? A life that, by any honest measure, is doing okay starts to feel like a failure. Progress that took months of real effort starts to feel small. Achievements that you should be proud of feel insignificant compared to what's on the screen. This isn't accurate. It isn't true. It's just the math your brain does when you give it the wrong inputs. And the more time you spend on the screen, the more wrong inputs you give it. The more wrong inputs, the more distorted your sense of where you are. The more distorted your sense of where you are, the heavier the feeling that you're always behind. It's a quiet system, running constantly, draining your sense of progress without you even noticing. The cost of always feeling. Behind the cost of always feeling behind is something most people never measure, but they pay it every single day. It costs you your present. When you're constantly focused on where you should be, you stop being able to fully exist where you actually are. The good moments lose their flavor. The achievements stop counting. The small wins disappear before you've even had time to notice them. Your life becomes a place you're always trying to escape from, instead of a place you're actually living in. It costs you your decisions. When the feeling of being behind is loud enough, it starts shaping your choices. You make rushed decisions because slow progress feels unbearable. You pick paths that look impressive instead of paths that actually make sense for you. You spend money you don't have on things that signal status just to feel briefly less behind. You stop choosing what's right. You start choosing what's fast. It costs you your peace. That low, constant pressure inside your chest is not free. It drains your energy. It poisons your rest. It steals from your relationships because part of you is always somewhere else. Measuring, calculating, comparing. And maybe, most importantly, it costs you your relationship with yourself. Because when you spend years feeling like you're not enough, not fast enough, not far enough, your brain starts to believe it, not as a thought, but as an identity. You stop being a person on a journey. You become a person who is behind, and once that identity locks in, even when you achieve things, even when life moves forward, you carry that label with you. The progress doesn't update the feeling. The wins don't dissolve the weight. This is what happened to Alex without him realizing it. He had been working hard. He had been making real progress. By any reasonable standard, his life was moving forward, but because he had spent years measuring himself against an impossible reference point, even the wins felt incomplete. He wasn't actually behind. He just felt behind. And feelings, when they last long enough, start to feel like facts. The real shift. The real shift in this trap doesn't come from achieving more, working harder, or finally catching up to whatever invisible standard your mind has been chasing. Because there is no catching up. The standard moves, the reference point updates, the race never ends. The shift comes from somewhere else entirely. It comes from realizing that the race itself was never real. Nobody is timing your life. Nobody has a master schedule for when things should happen. There is no judge, no scoreboard, no finish line. The pressure you feel is not coming from the world. It's coming from a system you absorbed, slowly, over many years, from sources that didn't even know your life. And once you see that, something inside you begins to soften. You start asking different questions. Instead of, am I on track? You start asking, on track to where? Instead of, am I doing enough? You start asking, enough by whose definition? Instead of, why am I behind? You start asking, behind whom exactly? These questions are not easy at first, because they go against everything your mind has been doing for years. But each time you ask them, the invisible structure starts losing power. You begin to see your life from a different angle. You start noticing how much you've actually done, how much you've already learned, how much you've already grown. The progress that was invisible because you were too busy measuring it against fiction. You also start noticing something else. The people you used to compare yourself to are doing the same thing, just in different directions. They're also looking at someone else, feeling behind, carrying weight they never named. Almost everyone is silently running a race against ghosts. And once you see that, you can choose to step out of the race, not by giving up on growth, not by abandoning ambition, not by pretending you don't want a better life, but by changing what you're growing toward. Building forward instead of comparing sideways. Measuring your progress against your own past, not against someone else's curated present. This shift is quiet. It doesn't show up in photos. It doesn't make a good post. It doesn't impress anyone watching from the outside, but it changes everything from the inside, because suddenly, your wins start counting again. Your progress feels real again. Your life starts to belong to you again. And that feeling of finally living inside your own story instead of constantly comparing it to someone else's is one of the most underrated forms of wealth a person can build. For Alex, this didn't happen in a single moment. It happened slowly, over many small realizations. The moment he noticed that he felt fine until he opened his phone. The moment he caught himself comparing his year to someone else's highlight. The moment he asked himself, honestly, whose life he was actually trying to live. These were not loud moments. They didn't change anything dramatically, but they changed his direction. He stopped measuring his progress in comparison. He started measuring it against his own starting point. He stopped chasing milestones because they were supposed to happen at certain ages. He started building a life that fit him, even if it didn't fit the cultural template. And slowly, the weight he had been carrying for years began to lift. Not because his life suddenly looked impressive on the outside, but because for the first time, he wasn't trying to make it look that way. He was just living it. You are not behind. You never were. There was just a system inside your mind and a world around you that quietly convinced you that you should be somewhere you're not. And as long as that system runs unexamined, you will keep feeling like you're chasing something that always stays one step ahead, no matter how much you grow, no matter how much you achieve. But the moment you see the system clearly, something inside you stops fighting. You realize that the race was never real. The timeline was never yours. The reference point was always an illusion. And in that recognition, a new kind of freedom appears. Not the freedom of finally winning, but the freedom of no longer needing to. You stop running against ghosts. You start walking your own path. And one day, almost without noticing, you realize something simple but powerful. The peace you were chasing was never going to come from being ahead of anyone. It was always going to come from finally being okay with where you are, not as a defeat, not as settling, but as the quiet, mature understanding that your life was never meant to look like anyone else's. It was meant to look like yours. And that, more than anything else, is what catching up to yourself really feels like.